We start with, hey, welcome to Spin Out, winner Dave, and we kind
I'm
of,
winner.
your winner.
All right. Well, we're here to demystify venture. We're going to be minimizing FOMO for VCs through the lens of GPs and LPs.
Thanks, Dave. In this new series, we're focusing on how LPs assess GPs and how you differentiate yourself as a GP.
But before getting too far, let's do a quick review of what this little mini series will be about and what we're going to cover. So, in our last episode, we introduced the idea of operational due diligence, and we're going to continue that with a series of episodes, probably 6 to 7, that'll walk through the main part of operational due diligence, the due diligence questionnaire. So, our episodes will kind of reflect those sections of that document. So, first today, we're going to be talking about team, and we'll come back and deep dive into alignment. How do you set up the right structure so you can do the job? And how do you pay the people and control the economics such that everybody is aligned? In the future, we'll also go through things like track record and investment strategy, fund formation and legal terms, compliance, risk management and governance, regulatory issues, and accounting and administration. And through this mini series, you'll learn the key parts of operational due diligence and what institutional LPs are looking for. All right, so now winner, you've had a long career in venture, both doing the active due diligence as, large institutional LP shops, and now as a GP for Coolwater, you see a lot of funds, you help coach a lot of managers through this process. So I'm excited today to dive in and ask you some questions. First question, you ready?
Yeah, let's kick
All
it
right,
off.
cool. So in your mind, what are the most important aspects of team and alignment? What do you focus on, or what do you kind of coach people to first?
Yeah, sure. So I think in this series, we're going to present a number of frameworks, right? So one framework in this episode is the difference between how LPs are evaluating your operations. So you as the GP, right, you have to run certain things. You as the GP control certain things, right? I as the LP am evaluating you as the GP and kind of what you control. So I think there's the operational or control perspective, and LPs want to go deep there and really understand that. Who is the key man? Who's making investment decisions? Who controls the cash? Who hires? Those types of things. The operations of kind of building your firm. The other piece of the framework is the team alignment, right? How does the team get structured now and eventually kind of grow and get structured in the future, right? And so I think this is really GP to GP alignment. How do you align with your partners? How do you align with your junior partners? But it's also GP to LP alignment, right? How are you as the GP, again, setting up the team so that, right, the incentives are aligned with your LPs, right? You're the fiduciary trying to, maximize outcomes for your LPs. LPs are thinking about the team alignment. If there's, one person that controls everything, right, and they have really talented team around them, the reality is that team probably won't persist over time, right? So again, LPs are going to be digging into those pieces of both GP to GP alignment, but also GP to LP alignment.
Right. I mean, it makes perfect sense because LPs, they want you to be a great investor, but at the end of the day, you are an investment manager, and there's so much more to this business than just picking the next great thing. There's a lot to do to safeguard and steward the LP's capital. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So let's get a little bit more detail here. So we talk about this concept of operational due diligence. We ask LPs, tell us what you want us to show you. And I think the market's evolved a little bit over time, and now we have a pretty good understanding. In your mind, what are those things that LPs are actually affirmatively seeking? Like what are LPs looking for when they're evaluating you?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I can start with kind of the list, and then maybe we'll dive deeper into like a practical example.
Perfect.
But LPs are really trying to understand fundamentally, right? Like if they're evaluating team, again, who is the GP, the general partner, who is making the investment decisions at the end of the day, right? Because alpha is going to be generated by who's picking the assets that make it into the portfolio. So it's really important for an LP to understand both the time and attention of the team, like which GPs are full-time, which GPs are part-time, who as the collective body of all team members are contributing to the investment process. That could be advisors, that could be venture partners, that could be junior team members, that could be interns, right? But fundamentally, to keep it simple, you as the LP are really trying to understand the time and attention of the people you're betting on. And then, yeah, it's sometimes very hard, especially in the context of an emerging manager, who are the team members, right? And so sometimes you get a bunch of bios in a data room and you're like, okay, well, who's full-time and who's part-time? Like, who are the actual GPs? What are their backgrounds? What have they done? What are their wins? What are their losses? What are their track records? I think this is really low hanging fruit, right? So if you're an emerging manager listening to this, it's just making sure LPs can quickly get up to speed, again, like on who's the comprehensive team, right? And what are their backgrounds.
You said team bios, you see org charts, it's in a data
I think it's
room. Like,
org chart. It could be an independent org chart within the pitch deck, right? Like you could have backgrounds and logos. I think you do have to be explicit. And I think having bios in your data room definitely helps, the LPs quickly get up to speed.
the difference between, say, Fund Zero, Fund One, that they may have a prior track record, they may have spun out of a large firm, but this is their first vintage or their fund. What would look different for them versus, say, a team that's been together for 3 or 4 vintages already and has got a different data room they're showing? What may be some of the levels of detailed difference between early Fund One and maybe a Fund Three looking
Yeah.
to go out?
Yeah, I think, oversharing, right? I think in the earlier days, including timelines is a very easy heuristic for LPs to understand, okay, you were at A, then B, then C, then D, now you're doing E. Like that's great. It all kind of lines up. It makes sense logically. I understand kind of where you were and kind of what you did and what your successes are. I think again, oversharing in the early days, if someone's evaluating your fund 3 or fund 4, there's already a pattern there. They're going to evaluate you based on performance if they're evaluating you kind of at that fund vintage. But in the early days, right, like you're betting on the people, you're betting on the team. So team, there's a reason why we started this series with team, because it's so fundamentally important for emerging managers where the LP really has to understand you as a person, as a team in order to get to that decision.
Great. So one other follow-up that I know I've had this question asked to me, and I'm sure you've had it asked to you as well. The nature of the market in 2025 is that there are some partnerships changing. They're hiring new people are moving on. Have you seen successful funds talk about that with institutional LPs? Like, yes, we've had some transition. Yes, there's been some movement. Here's what it is. Well, here's what this is for. How have you seen the best funds kind of engage in those conversations?
Yeah, so a big part about, again, the GP to LP alignment is how you're communicating team developments, with your LPs and even amongst your team members. Having a history with your partner specifically around investing, right? If that person is going to have control. Again, a big thing that LPs will be evaluating is who controls the firm, right? Who controls the business, but also more importantly, who makes the investment decisions. And so if you're a fund one, right, and you're a multi-decision maker team, making sure there's a history there of collaborating and making investment decisions together. Again, you can have a multi-person team, right? And have kind of one person in control. That might actually be better than having like 3 people you've never made investment decisions with. Even if you're, an NBA all-star team, it might not be like the perfect fit for an LP because they want to kind of see a fun cycle of you collaborating and investing together, right? So it does help. We're going to talk about this in the next episode. It does help to really understand kind of the team alignment, kind of the economics behind team alignment. Again, if you're early days and over communicating, being very clear with who is on the team and who is making decisions, because an LP has to make that bet. Another thing for successful funds. So if you're a fund one going on a fund two and, you are transitioning out a partner, what does that transition look like? There's different ways that transition can happen. Are you 3 or 4 people and then you're losing one person, or are you 2 people and you're losing half your team? I think, again, it comes down to the communication and, what the actual structure is, and frankly, just how thoughtful you're being about it. So I have seen, 2-person teams, come together, they invest a fund and they just realize, right? Like one person wants to do pre-seed and one person wants to do A, right? Or one person wants to do, this theme and one person wants to do that theme. So you've built a great portfolio. You're both great investors. It's not even based on like performance. It's more based on like a divergence of where you want to take the business. And there are splits happening, right? I think it's inevitable. There's thousands of firms out there. So it's inevitable you're going to see this team development, this evolution, this maturation. Again, how that's restructuring and how you're communicating that to LPs is super important.
Definitely makes a lot of sense. One, transparent and be upfront, be honest with LPs early on, especially if you're planning for that next fund. And it's also important that as these things happen, you can't hide it, and trying to hide it will ultimately get, found out, and that will definitely ruin your relationship with LPs.
I think a lot of LPs, if they're investing into emerging managers, understand there will be an evolution of the firm, right? I think you, as a fiduciary, have to put, again, the portfolio first, right? Like that is your role and responsibility. Sometimes having candid conversations with your LPs, you can learn a lot, right? Some of your LPs might say, I noticed you might have a gap here, or are you thinking about complementing your team with like this resource? Having those communication channels open can actually kind of, again, strengthen your team because your LPs are providing candid feedback. And ultimately, like that's not only better for your relationship with that LP that's giving candid feedback, but I'd say it's better for, future LPs that you're pitching, right? Because they're going to kind of say like, oh, great. Like over fund one and fund two, like they've matured the team. It feels like much stronger, right? So your,
Yeah.
value proposition to a net new LP at fund two or fund three could be much stronger if you open up those communication channels with LPs early and you're open to being coached and to taking that feedback from LPs that have a more objective perspective.
I guess let's get a little tactical here, Winner. So you've done hundreds of these initial calls with GPs. You've done follow-up calls and coaching. After the Zoom ins and the LPs get together in their small group, what are they talking about after these initial pitches regarding team and structure of the group they just spoke with? What happens behind the scenes after we leave very tactically right away?
Yeah, it's a great question. More tactically, right? Like what are LPs thinking about before the meeting, during the meeting, after the meeting, kind of
And doing,
what's the
like
water
what do they
cooler talk?
actually do?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think before the meeting, right? Like that goes back to you're communicating with LPs, right? Just what is that experience? Are you doing it remotely? Are you doing it in person? Who's communicating with the LPs? Like, is that a seamless process, right? It's just like these pieces of like, are you a sophisticated firm can be very clear, even before you jump on a call, right? How are materials shared? What materials shared? What do they look like, right? There's kind of a footprint or an impression you're making before you even get on a call. So that's one, I think, perspective on team, like I'm reviewing stuff. What does it look like? Is it clear to me kind of who the team is and who the decision makers are even before we get in a room, Zoom room or in person? Another piece could be during the meeting, right? Who shows up to the meeting? How are they even like sitting together? Like, are they sitting next to each other? Are they on like the end caps of a large,
So, I
boardroom
mean, you're
table?
really assessing interpersonal dynamic and body language and just how long you think how well these people are getting together.
Who am I to assess that? But I do know that many LPs assess that dynamic, right? Who is talking? Someone's taking up 90% of the airtime. That might be for a good reason, right? Maybe the questions kind of center around a certain theme and that partner is the expert in that theme. But again, like I think LPs are really, again, trying to understand who the real team is, who the real decision makers are, right? So there is an evaluation as you're presenting, right? And then it's, again, this is going to be the person that I'm going to give, $10 million, $50 million. Like, how confident do I feel with them managing that money, right? Do I feel confident that I can trust this person with that amount of money? Is there, clarity of thinking there? How are they thinking about the firm now? How are they thinking about the vision, right? So these are different pieces that an LP is definitely evaluating during the meeting. And then, to answer your question, like at the water cooler, um, there's okay, what were GPs saying? Do we agree with it? Do we disagree with it? Right? Is this like a top person in the space? What are GPs not saying? Right? Which is potentially even more important, right? Like you're trying to say the right things, I think, as a GP, which can sometimes be great, but sometimes can also fail, right? Like you're
Yeah.
trying to be best friends with everyone, which sometimes isn't the best strategy. So sometimes what you're not saying might actually, hurt you, right? So just again, as a GP, being very well prepared, but also you're trying to curate the meeting, but not trying to curate it too much to where, you're just misrepresenting or, you're just like
Mhm.
not actually going to do what you're saying you're going to do. I think again, there's a marketing and sales element to fundraising. I think GPs sometimes try to over optimize on that versus like LPs are really looking for substance, right? Like, have you done what you said you were going to do already? versus like just here's what I'm going to do, right? And like you have no track record of doing that. I think that can be disruptive to the fundraising process. Um, again, to that point of are you a top in your space, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's not a specific theme. It's more like, are you a top 5 or a top 10 person? Why are you going to like, again, win access to the best deals? LPs are really trying to understand like, is this person, do they really grasp what this profession is, like venture capital? Do they really grasp the kind of gravitas of being a fund manager, like managing other people's money? I think, do they grasp the gravitas of being a fiduciary, right? And then like, are they the best in their space? Like if I'm the LP is going to put their, founder hat on for a second and say like, if I'm a founder, would I take this person's money, right? And like, is that believable, right? And there is an element of sales to that. Like as a VC, you have to be really good at convincing very smart people to take your money when, maybe now more than ever, like some founders can bootstrap really quickly. So maybe they don't even need your money. So there is that element of like, how much of an expert are you? Why would you be brought on the cap table? And like, are you really good at convincing people to kind of like, take your money?
Yeah. And I would say in my own experience, having, participated in on the GP side of some of these ODD processes, there is still a lot of low hanging fruit that is obvious that I'm not so sure people will take advantage of the opportunity to get it right. But like, you should Google yourself. You should understand what information is being publicly presented about you. Larger ODD teams, larger institutions will do cursory background checks. They will check the SEC and FINRA. And if you have been registered in the past, they will look up your information. And so you should be prepared and make sure that what is presented about you publicly on the web and, what is going to be provided in your data room is accurate, is the best picture, because LPs will double check it with government databases, with the publicly available tools. So this is something to keep in mind because I'm not sure a lot of folks think about that.
Yeah. So I think we're going to put the pin in it there for this episode, but we do want to tease out the next episode. We've talked a lot about the things that LPs are going to evaluate when thinking about team and the alignment of the GP. What we haven't talked about a lot is the economics of team alignment. And so next week, we'll dive into some more details and some frameworks, thinking through carry splits, vesting schedules, clawbacks. We want to help you as the GP think about how to proactively outline that, especially for an emerging manager fund, and really understand how those mechanics work. So expect the episode next week to also be on team and alignment, but more focused on the frameworks for thinking about setting up economics across your team.
All right, let's transition to our Did You See portion of the episode.
Dave.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to share with everyone is we're now sitting pretty much at the end of Q3 in 2025. And so to timestamp that, Carta has just recently released their Q2 data. But I've been getting a lot of requests from folks to take that data and overlay their current fund metrics on top of it as a way of communicating with LPs or for internal decision making to see how they relatively stack up. And so if you're a fund manager out there and haven't downloaded from the Carta Data Minute their Q2 relative performance for funds, I would highly recommend it. And I would say you'll also be pleasantly surprised if you look at some of the data where we're actually starting to see, and the Carta data set is across cohorts, across vintage years, we're starting to see a little bit of a tick up in TVPI and IRR, indicating, I think, what many of us are feeling, which is increased activity in 2025. It's not going crazy right now, but I think we're starting to notice and see some of the impacts of the increased deal flow and some of the markups that have been coming down. And Carta's data is one of the better sources to get every quarter.
Great. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it on a positive note.
Yeah. Get out there and make some deals. That's what it's all about.
Well, thanks, everyone. We will see you next week. Thanks, Dave.
All right. See you next week.